you hungry for a big bite of climate change, Ottawa? Because we've got some big questions to chew on. Can we use food as a vehicle for climate action? Yes, we can. Are individual actions enough? No, they're not. Do we need to bite the system? Yes, we do. Tonight, we'll talk about how our food system causes climate change and how food and agriculture can be a solution to climate change. And I'll be making the case that we can't fix climate change unless we fix food. Food has become a large-scale industrial activity. Let's look at why that's a problem. The way we grow our food, the way we package, transport, sell, and waste our food is a climate change problem. Most of our crops and livestock are grown with intensive factory-style farming. We use fossil fuels to run the machines and the operations. We use a lot of energy and petroleum inputs. All of that releases carbon and methane and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And large-scale commercial meat production has a huge footprint. The way of producing food like this comes from a mindset of conquering nature and squeezing the most out of living beings, whether it's animals or the soil. It's the economic logic of the system that forces farmers to make choices, to make their operations bigger and bigger, to survive in a global market. And the connection to climate change? Well, agriculture is responsible for 11% of all greenhouse gases. In Canada, that number is a lot higher if you include the entire food system. Globally, our food system, from the farm to transport to retail to our plates and to the landfill, is responsible for more than 30% of our greenhouse gases. But what about other countries? Let's step outside of Canada so we can get a different picture of food and climate around the world. We're going to take a little trip to Central America. Meet Victoria, Sylvia, and Aida in the mountains of Honduras. So I'm standing here next to them and they're explaining to me the benefits of intercropping and growing corn, beans, and squash together. By the way, those three crops are known as the Three Sisters. These farmers see food, climate, biodiversity, and nutrition as all part of a whole system. Victoria grows more than 25 crops here in this tiny field. It's about a 30-degree angle. Soil erosion here is a huge problem. And then there's the devastating hurricanes that were there this year. They're extremely vulnerable to climate change. But they use agroecology to take care of the soil, to improve the resilience of their ecosystems and the diversity of their crops. But because biodiversity is their insurance against climate change and hunger. And what if I told you that these three farmers are among the majority of those who feed the world? There's 500 million smallholder farmers in the world. They produce 70% of the world's food. They're highly resource efficient. Their agriculture is ecological and climate friendly, and it feeds families. And now, let's look at the industrial agricultural system. It uses more than 70% of the world's resources. It eats up huge amounts of energy, land and infrastructure, and money and technology. Small farmers just can't compete with that. This form of agriculture is highly destructive and emissions intensive as well, but at the same time, not as productive or resilient as small-scale farming. Family farmers all over the world are practicing agroecology and climate-friendly agriculture. In Brazil, in India, and Canada as well. Local food systems and ecological farming are taking off all over the country, but especially in Quebec. And aside from a low footprint and more biodiversity, it's also a mindset of care for each other and respect for nature. But wait, even with hundreds of millions of people around the world doing ecological farming, it's still not enough. Why? Because the system doesn't work for smallholder farmers. They can't get access to land or to special grants or to certification. They often take risks, but the only risks insurance they have is their own biodiversity. Most ecological farmers around the world don't get fair prices for what they grow. They don't have the benefits of mainstream marketing to show that the food they grow is higher quality for consumers. And they bear the brunt of our carbon emissions as well, even though they're doing more than their fair share for climate change. In other words, They're fighting an uphill battle against the system. Now, what do we mean by the system? Let's talk a moment about that. The system we have to change includes policies, subsidies, and incentives that go to industries that create climate change and pollute the environment. Subsidies usually benefit the biggest agri-food companies. Family farmers get very little. As a society, we've chosen to subsidize environmental destruction way more than climate action. For example, we subsidize chemical fertilizers and prioritize the biggest staple crops for export. And we give hundreds of billions of dollars in public subsidies to fossil fuel companies. In large-scale industrial agriculture, the real costs are often externalized. Food is kept cheap, but the hidden costs are paid in other ways. Costs like carbon in the atmosphere and the damage to the environment, pesticides that are killing pollinators and poisoning our waters, and then there's the health costs from eating poor quality food. Corporate power has increased astronomically in the last decades. Monopoly in the food industry is out of control. The biggest corporations own the means of production, the distribution, the research, and the bulk of the profits. Just 3 companies own 2/3 of the world's commercial seeds, for example. That's no accident. The biggest agri-food companies built the system this way. Their lobbying keeps us in an old model of agriculture that's creating climate change. False solutions. This is basically an escape clause that allows you to keep doing what you were doing before and say you found an answer. For example, trading your carbon emissions with somebody who's polluting less, or finding a technology that might fix one thing, but you're not sure what the consequences might be elsewhere. I'm not sure that this spaceship is going to save us. What we need is genuine systemic solutions and real emissions reductions. That's why I say we need to bite back the system that creates climate change. And food is an excellent vehicle to change the system because we have the power to do it, starting with the system that's closest to us because that's our lowest hanging fruit. And it's probably easiest to change first. Communities are biting back and changing climate change through food every day. You can too. Get involved in community initiatives that reduce the carbon footprint of your food. For example, convincing a university or hospital to buy food from local and ecological food providers. Get involved in community gardens, seed fairs, or farmers markets that connect producers to eaters. Ask for municipal policies that support local food. Ask for the right kinds of supports to ecological farmers that are fighting climate change. And ask governments to help other farmers move in that direction. You can also join campaigns to change corporate practices and food and climate justice movements around the world. And because food is as much personal as it is political, get to know as much as you can about your food, where it was grown, who's the farmer. Consider the ecological footprint and the quality of the food, as well as the relationships embedded in it, and then make good food choices. Do your fair share. Start with the personal and the local, but make sure the system is also fair. And as you're biting back climate change, don't forget to enjoy every bite, because every bite counts.